born in Salisbury, Maryland in 1945, January 24th. I grew up in Dover, Delaware at a time when this so-called civil rights movement was at its peak. And probably the apex of that movement was the victory in Brown versus Board of Education, where in essence the segregated schools were held unconstitutional, and the whole society was really mobilized to accept changes in public accommodations and transportation and employment and voting rights. It was a massive effort, and a lot of changes took place for me and a lot of my friends and so forth. But the lawyers that were involved in the litigation were really heroes of mine. And I think later on, when I graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy and tried to really settle on what profession I might follow, I decided to apply to law school. And I wasn't necessarily interested in civil rights law, but I thought that because of the law itself offered such a chance for needed change, that I chose to go to law school. I still had, I think, a heart for public service. So I didn't go into civil rights, but on the other hand, I really thought that government service was the way I wanted to go. And I met a law professor. Well, I'd never heard of him before, but I'd heard that he was a judge. He taught on a part-time basis, and his name was Leon Higginbotham. Judge Higginbotham, who was on the faculty and adjunct professor at the law school, University of Pennsylvania Law School. And after I graduated, Judge Higginbotham invited me to a 2-year clerkship with him. Judge Higginbotham had a very special way of a factor, I guess, in considering his law clerks, because a law clerk is a very, particularly a district court law clerk, it's a very prestigious position. You're there for 2 years, that's it. But the name of the judge that you're clerking for, you're kind of carrying that name of that. The experience that I had in Judge Higginbotham's chambers, because he would kind of explain to you, you'd be in the courtroom and as his clerk, but afterwards he would kind of give you some sort of tutorial as to what was going on in terms of settlement issues, if it was a settlement case. And we had both criminal and civil, so in that experience it was both civil and criminal. And sort of the dynamics of the process. He was really the most influential person, aside from my father, in my life, in my professional life. By the time the 2-year clerkship was over, I got a call from the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was right in the same courthouse, to inviting me to put in an application as an assistant U.S. attorney. So, going from the bench, district court in Judge Higginbotham's chambers, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, I was then able to learn litigation firsthand. I was asked to go to Washington to head up an office in the criminal division of the U.S. Department of Justice, and it was the narcotic and dangerous drug section. And that was an office of about 35 attorneys in Washington, and we dealt with litigation, usually assisting other U.S. attorneys' offices that needed assistance in drug cases and special cases. But also we dealt with legislation. We worked with the State Department because a lot of the sort of national and international issues involved smuggling and assistance of foreign law enforcement. By the time the Reagan administration was in its second year, the U.S. Attorney's position was not filled for Philadelphia. And I had this kind of experience, not just litigation, well, it's not just, but in terms of litigation, criminal litigation, and that's where I had international experience and legislative experience, and had testified on Capitol Hill with regard to various bills and so forth. I dealt with the White House, and so now all of a sudden I have a greatly expanded experience base, and that kind of happened at the time that while the Reagan administration was kind of getting organized and trying to figure out who they wanted to fill different spots and things like that. So I eventually got the nod and came back from Washington, and I guess I was probably 38 or so, and I took U.S. Attorney's office, took over as the U.S. Attorney. So I kind of got associated with that. Now I got associated more particularly with the mob cases because I ended up trying Nicky Scarfo and Leland Beloff and his aide in that corruption case involving the Penn's Landing and Liberty Place. I was the first African American U.S. attorney in Philadelphia's history at that time, and was the biggest office and the largest district headed by an African American U.S. attorney. And I remember, the story kind of was, at the time when I was there, the day I was sworn in, there was a big sort of press conference, or held in my office, asking, what's the significance of being the first black U.S. attorney in Philadelphia? And I said, well, first of all, I think the fact that we do have a black U.S. attorney is very significant given the history of our, of our country. In this appointment, and I think that speaks well to how far we've come, not just African Americans, but in terms of the country. But in terms of me personally, I said, I think you ought to wait and see what kind of job I do before you can say this is a great success in terms of. If for some reason I really made a horrible mistake, and it could not really be corrected or something like that, I did not want history, or maybe even just the general public, to feel that it was a mistake having an African American in that position.